I hate to break it to you guys who are new programmers, so if you're coming to my channel and you just started learning to code, or maybe even got your first job and you just started your career, I have some bad news to break. And the bad news is that you're gonna make a ton of mistakes while you're doing this. These are self-inflicted wounds that are gonna make your life a lot more difficult. But the good news is that in this video, I'm gonna cover those 4 mistakes in depth, those 4 things I wish you guys would stop doing, and I'll also give you guys an antidote or a way out of it. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. So the first thing I want you guys to stop doing is to stop asking questions poorly. So the first thing you have to know about asking questions is that if you want to get better as a software developer, it's really important that you ask questions. So if you have a mentor, if you have people at your job who can help you, you need to ask them questions, because there's no better way to level up, to get your skills to a very high level, than to ask questions with people who have a lot of experience, because they can help you to know a lot of information in a short period of time. It's much better than trying to read all the information on the internet, for example. However, when you ask them questions, you better be damn sure that you're asking them a question in a way that makes it as easy for them to answer as possible. So the common scenario for so many of you new programmers is that when you go and ask a question, you're very lazy about it, right? So you just kind of tell them like, hey, something's not working. The phrase something's not working is not something a developer understands. We do not get that, because when you write code, it's doing exactly as you meant it to do. So we first need to know, what is the expectation of what this code is supposed to do versus what is actually happening? Because if we know the expectation versus the result, we can then try to figure out exactly what you're trying to do. So make sure you're clearly describing that. So if you're building a web app and there's a login functionality to that you're currently working on, you need to describe to them what you'd expect. So a user should be able to put in their username and password. When they click the submit button, it redirects them to the home page. That's your expectation. And then tell them after that, say, but what's happening is when I put in the username and password, I click the submit button and nothing happens. Okay, boom, there you go. We know exactly what's happening versus what you would expect to happen. Now, on top of that, the 2 other things that I'd say you need to include as far as information is any errors or stack traces. If you don't include errors or stack traces, the developer then has to go in and really dig and try to figure out what those errors and stack traces are. Then they have to confirm with you, do you see this? So make sure you include those things. It makes their lives a lot easier and they will appreciate it. And the last thing I'd actually recommend as well, anytime you ask for help, is let people know what you tried to do or even what you Googled to try to figure this out, because they're likely going to do the same thing. And you could save them a little bit of time by telling them you tried this or you Googled that phrase. So that's really, really important. If you want developers around you or on the internet, even like in my free group, if you go there and post a problem, if you want them to help you, which is really important, by the way, because again, it shortens that learning curve, make sure to ask questions in a structured way and to include all of the requisite information. The next thing I wish new programmers would stop doing is watching any of my videos and not going down below and smashing the subscribe button. So make sure to go down and do that. I hear that it's like 10 times more likely to make you a software developer, so definitely go down there and do that. The second thing that I want new programmers to stop doing is over-engineering and overthinking a lot of the code that they write. Because when you become a software developer or you just start learning this, the idea of writing perfect code is high on the list of things you want to do, because you feel as if you write perfect code in your portfolio projects that will translate to a job, that some software developer will look through your code and go, oh my gosh, this is the perfect code, I will hire you. But the truth is that many of you guys just spend a lot of time thinking about writing perfect code and refactoring your code endlessly over and over again, obsessing over it, and it doesn't really provide any measurable or major differences in the code that you write. So first off, I want to make super clear that to write code in a more readable way, very, very important. To write code that is more efficient, to write code that is really well organized in a way that makes sense, these are all ideals that you should shoot for and you should think about. But there's a certain diminishing return when you've spent so much time doing it. So if you're building an app in your portfolio, the first thing you want to focus on is, does it work? So does it work? Does it work? Does it work? If the answer is yes, okay, great. You've made it like so much farther than so many people I know. You should give yourself a pat on the back. Spend a little bit of time thinking then, okay, how can I make this better? So apply anything that you've learned from the previous projects that you built. If there's any YouTube videos you watch, tutorials that are talking about different ways to maybe make the code more readable. For example, if you read the book Clean Code, there's a lot of really good tips in there. Yes, definitely spend some time, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, or maybe even 30 minutes, or even maybe up to an hour, But beyond that, obsessing over trying to make it perfect code is not going to result in what you think it's going to. Because even when your portfolio goes out there on GitHub, maybe other people will be looking at it, but what comprises good code, right? So like whatever you think good code is very subjective. Many people don't even agree on what good code is. So just do your best to learn as much as possible and spend a little bit of time with each project to maybe refactor and think about things, but don't obsess with it. Be pragmatic, move on, build as many projects as you can. And over time, you'll understand what good code is and you'll start to build a mental model of what that even is. So the third thing that I wish many new programmers would stop doing is stop being so afraid of making mistakes. Right? So the best way to be a good programmer, in my opinion, the best strategy I've seen is to experiment as much as you possibly can, right? When an idea comes to your head, try it. And being willing to make a mistake, to break things, because honestly, the best breakthroughs I've ever had came from mistakes that I made, quote unquote mistakes, right? I wrote some code, it didn't work, and then I have to go and dig deeper and really figure out why it didn't work like I expected it to work. Or maybe I had to read a lot of articles about it. Maybe I had to go really deep in my understanding. And I work with a lot of you guys, right? So many of my clients, I have to like train them out of this because they come in, they start building projects and they get really timid because they build a project up, maybe they spent maybe a few days, a few weeks, and it becomes their baby and they don't want to break it. But the problem is for them to make a breakthrough, for them to learn more than they understand now, they have to go in and break things, right? But here's the thing. You've got this beautiful thing now called source control. And many of you guys don't use it properly because with source control, it will have your back. So you can be building a project, you can create a branch which is isolated from all of that good code, and you can experiment as much as you'd like. You can experiment to your heart's delight. You can break things, and guess what? With one command, you can go back to having a nice, beautiful working application. So I would recommend for those of you guys who find yourself scared or you're not willing to experiment, learn about Git branching and really learn how to use it, because if you're using it properly, you shouldn't ever have a fear of breaking some of your code. So make lots of mistakes, experiment, and do whatever you can to learn as much as you possibly can. The fourth thing that new programmers should stop doing is not planning. Because I know how easy it is. You first learn to code, you're building projects, maybe you're at your first job, you get assigned a work item. It's easy to think you can just start diving in there and writing code because that's the way it's done. But the truth is that a good programmer, at least, will really stop to think about what they're doing, because you can easily waste so much of your time coding yourself into a corner, like writing some code and realizing that that's not going to work because you haven't thought about it. Or you could just spend a lot of time sort of experimenting, right? So say you're building like a web app or something, you're building the front end to it. A lot of times what I would do is just start kind of building it. I had an idea in my head, it wasn't very clear, but as I would build it out, it would change like 20 times. If I just sat down and prototyped it, right? So just created a skeleton, a black and white skeleton, it would have made my life a lot easier, but it also would have meant less time spending actually writing code. And you should be super careful with how you use your time because you probably don't have a lot of it, right? So if you're learning to code, you probably are working a job, a full-time job, maybe you have family responsibilities, but even at your job, like your company wants you to do things quickly, or at least timely, maybe we'll say. And so you don't have all the time in the world. But even more than that, I think for me, like what I've seen with planning is that it makes the process easier. Like you just don't use as much brain power, right? So if you plan things out from the beginning, if you sort of give yourself a clear idea of what you need to do, like what the functionality is, you can kind of just go through step by step and write a little bit of code, cross something off your list, write a little bit more code, cross another thing off your list, and it's just very orderly and structured. If you don't plan, it's kind of just chaos, and you kind of have to stop a lot, think about what you're doing, and it makes it tiring, but it also makes it not nearly as fun. So any way that you can write code that's more structured, more organized, more systematic, the better it's going to be for you in the long run. Alrighty, so those are the 4 things that new programmers should stop doing. If you enjoyed this video, I kindly ask that you go down below and smash that like button, as it allows me to share this video with more people. Also, leave me a comment. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Other than that, if you're interested, I have a free PDF report of the Self-Taught Programmer Study Guide. I think it's really, really helpful for those of you guys who are looking to become software developers. I try to put as much good information in there from everything I've learned on my own. You can download a copy of that in the description below. Other than that, that's all I've got. Thank you so much as always for watching, and peace out.